Something I heard from a mentor once said to me, where he said the best work gets done when you're open to anything but attached to nothing. And I feel like that having that mindset with communication is very important. So if you come into any conversation with this mindset that you're attached to your ideas of, okay, I knew the audit area and I know exactly what's going on here, and no matter what this person says, I know that I'm right about this, you are going to lose whoever you're speaking to.
This episode is brought to you by Greenskies Analytics, an audit analytics service provider that works with internal audit departments that have data analysts and are still frustrated with trying to make analytics actually work, aren't getting the expected ROI, who can't break through the communication barrier between the analysts and the audit team, and those that need experienced direction through an audit analytics strategy and process. Those that feel like they've wasted time and money on trainings, aren't getting the value they want, not prioritizing the highest risk areas for the organizations, or have projects that seemingly never get completed. Do you deal with any of that? If you do, go to the show notes of this episode and click the Greenskies Analytics link, or go to greenskiesanalytics.com to schedule a call and understand how Greenskies Analytics makes analytics actually work for internal audit.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Audit Podcast. I'm your host, Trent Russell. Today on the show, we have the Silberlust brothers. So we have Justin and Jared. Justin's the Associate Director of Audit for Oppenheimer. They're an investment firm. And Jared is, of course, why would we not have, an internal medicine physician in New York City. And if you're listening, you're like, how do we have a physician on the Audit Podcast? So a little backstory. Justin being an audit, Jared being a physician, they realized that they communicate similarly to their, let's call them clients, auditees, patients, in delivering bad news in some scenarios. Or helping the client understand the approach that is needing to be taken from audit or from a physician side. And so they both found these parallels in how they work with their clients, auditees, whatever, through this technique, this protocol called motivational interviewing. And so the two of them have, kind of gone back and forth and swapped notes and gone, hey, this is how I can do it, and this is how I can do it. Let's go do it. From their real world experience, they came on the show to talk about the protocol that is the motivational interviewing protocol. And so Jared gives some examples from the physician side, and then Justin gives some real world examples from the audit side. But you can 100% use this, as the title says, during audit kickoff. And then obviously you can use it throughout for effective communications in general with your auditees or clients. And if we have any physicians that are listening, your patients. The other thing that you might hear us mention is the SPIKES methodology. So initially the idea was we're going to go through motivational interviewing and the SPIKES methodology. And about 2/3 of the way through, we kind of paused it and I went, let's just keep hammering motivational interviewing and pull out the examples and real world use cases from that. And then let's pick up the SPIKES methodology later down the road, and we'll do an episode just on SPIKES methodology. So keep an eye out for the SPIKES methodology episode. That'll be coming out in a couple of weeks. But for now, here is the Silberlust brothers. Here we go. Justin, what is in your internet browsing history and or your ChatGPT or Llama or any LLM of choice for you lately?
Sure. So the first thing in my internet browsing history for sure is coping mechanisms on how to be a Met fan these days, and so it's been a struggle my whole life. So, but aside from that, we took a big family trip out to Arizona, Wyoming, Utah, and Idaho. So a lot of things about the sites and the different animals we were seeing out there. It was a really interesting vacation and experience. So the internet was, my browsing history is filled with different recommendations and food places and different sites and a lot of things to see there. It was a really great trip.
Maybe it's just the timing as we're going into summer vacation time and when we're asking this in the spring, but I think vacation research has been the number one answer from pretty much everybody. Apologies for being a Mets fan. I grew up a Braves fan, and then the older I've gotten, the less baseball I've watched. I think in the last 10 years, I watched a couple of innings when the Cubs were in the World Series, and then like a couple of innings when the Braves were in it a couple of years ago, because those both seemed like pretty. Well, the Cubs was definitely historic, and then the Braves, it seemed like they came out of nowhere. But I could be totally wrong on that. I don't don't pay attention that much. So thoughts and prayers to the Mets.
It's rough. I mean, we haven't recovered since you guys beat us in 2022. That series at the end of the year was just haven't recovered since.
So you didn't have to say you guys, because I didn't even know that happened. That's how little I pay attention to it. So I didn't even know that happened.
Yeah.
All right, Jared, what's been going on in your world? What internet browsing history, ChatGPT history? What's been going on?
I'm just thinking of Justin's answer. If someone listens to this podcast in 20 years, they'll still relate with this how bad the Mets are. So that's a timeless thing.
Timeless.
In my ChatGPT history, I'll piggyback off of Justin's Wyoming. We were walking around the town of Jackson Hole, which was really enjoyable. And on one of the buildings, there was this plaque, and it read, this building is dedicated to the Independent Order of Odd Fellows. I was like, what is going on? We're there to see the mountains, and we're there to have a good experience. But then there was just this weird plaque. So I asked ChatGPT, what makes the Independent Order of Odd Fellows odd? And ChatGPT basically, in so many words, said it's a group of people who got together and they were considered odd because they were nice to each other.
That's nice.
And I got thinking about that. That they would help each other through life difficulties. End of life things, giving each other food. And I was thinking, that is kind of odd. People don't do that.
Yeah.
What's wrong with these people? So that was an interesting find.
Sad state of the world. There's I know a lot of people do something, maybe even in the form of like a challenge, like a 30-day act of kindness challenge or something like that. And I guess we could rebrand it to an act of oddness, and just like, oh, it's so odd that you were nice to somebody.
That's pretty on brand with what ChatGPT was telling me about the IOOF.
Nice. Well, all right. I think to kick this off, Justin, if you could explain, tee up the topics that we're going to talk about in terms of not necessarily why you're here, but why Jared is here.
Sure. So Jared and I been having discussions about, just about our careers and some of our similar interests. And he brought up these two really interesting techniques that himself as a doctor, he himself as a doctor uses, and that's motivational interviewing and Spike's technique. And when we were talking about these, we ultimately made the connection that there was a lot of similarities between how a doctor communicates with their patients and how an auditor, myself, communicates with our clients. So in having these discussions and through some personal stories that I'll be happy to share, we were able to kind of make these connection about how to deliver bad news using the Spike's technique. They're having challenging discussions, as well as motivational interviewing, which is empowering your clients as a counseling technique to help empower your clients to talk about their problems or talk about the issues, the things that they're going with, because it's more likely that they'll take action on their problems if they can talk about it. And Jared will talk more about these two techniques as well.
And the reason I like the way we're doing this is I like anytime we have a technique, we'll call it a best practice, whatever you want to call it, from a different industry or profession that we bring into audit and then go, okay, let's make this fit. This makes a lot of sense. Let's make it work for us. And how can we do it? So I love these types of conversations. I think about, even Agile, 20, 25 years ago was very much a software thing. And now it's basically everywhere. Seemingly there's no, at least in the corporate business world, there's no department job function where you can't apply some of those techniques. So that's why I think this is super interesting. I know, so I have a very similar situation, sort of. So my brother is also internal medicine. But the reason that I always bring that up is at a minimum, people go, all right, if his brother's a doctor, Trent can't be that dumb. And so I interject it as much as possible. Like, hey, what are you doing here? I'm here on vacation. My brother's a doctor, by the way, as much as I can, I try to let people know just so they go, you can't be that dumb, man. All right. All right. So with that said, let's start with motivational interviewing. What is that? Walk us through the kind of your definition and as well as the protocol that could be followed there.
I guess just to echo what Justin was saying really quickly, I don't know if this will be interesting to the viewers or not. I was really surprised about the similarities in my job and in Justin's job. He's auditing clients. I'm auditing patients and their medical records. We're both doing data review, interviewing, preparing documentation, discussing with our supervisors, and then finally putting together a communication and a submission of a assessment of what's going on, and then a plan of what to do. And that is totally my job in a nutshell. And when Justin was telling me about what his workday is like, that's pretty much what he's doing too. So that was really one of the bigger sparks for our conversation. What is similar between our work and what can we share to make each of us better? So I thought that was pretty cool. I'm happy to talk a little bit about the motivational interviewing. So a bunch of psychologists got together in the 80s and they were attacking the problem. How can we get people to make better decisions? How can we get people to do the right thing more often? And so they came up with this framework, and a lot of what this topic today circles around is frameworks for being better communicators. We, as either physicians or auditors or any kind of professional, big part of our job is communicating with others and trying to encourage them to do what we think is best and hopefully what also is in actuality best. And so a bunch of these psychologists got together and they basically said, hey, if we can develop a framework where the interviewer can encourage good behavior, we should promote this framework. And so there are a couple main points to the motivational interviewing framework. The first is expressing empathy. And Trent, do you want me to give patient examples as I go, or do you want me to do a full rundown of the motivational interviewing framework first? A perfect example of how motivational interviewing is used, and I think a good way to explain it is smoking cessation. So we know smoking is one of the biggest problems in the United States. It's the leading cause of lung cancer and heart disease and so many other things. And it's very challenging to quit when people are smoking. It's one of the most nicotine is one of the most addicting things that people can experience. And so it takes very creative solutions to try to break that cycle. And so motivational interviewing is one of these potential solutions. And it's broken down into a couple of steps. This framework is broken down into a couple of steps. Step one is expressing empathy. And that's basically just us saying, we know where you're coming from. So when a patient walks in my door and they're here to talk about anything, including smoking cessation, first thing I say to them is, hey man, I'm proud of you for coming in today. You had your whole free day to do whatever you wanted. You could have gone to work. You could have gone to McDonald's. But you chose to spend your time here with me today. And that's something you should be proud of. You care about your health. This is showing me that you care about your health. And whether or not the person actually cares about their health or not, I think that this starts to make them believe that they do, because I am introducing this idea that they're spending their free time. I'm empathizing with their day. They have so much stuff to do, and they chose to take their time out to spend time with me. So that's step one of empathy. And then something I say is, especially when it comes to smoking cessation, is this stuff is really, really hard. This is not an easy thing to do. The average person takes over 30 times of trying to quit before they're able to quit. So I'm proud of you for trying. And this is something, Justin, when you and I were speaking about this, you were telling me a little bit, and I think this is a good bridge between our professions, is that going through audits is a tedious thing for clients to do. Like, that is not a fun task for them. It is not enjoyable. That's just something that I kind of put in my head as a parallel to quitting smoking is difficult, and completing an audit is also a difficult thing.
Absolutely.
So that's step one. Step two is developing discrepancy. So this is one of the key steps in the framework of motivational interviewing. I rarely tell patients that smoking causes cancer. Instead, I'll ask patients, hey, what do you know about smoking? What do you know about the effects of smoking on your health? And almost all the time, they'll tell me, oh, it's really bad for me. It causes cancer. It clogs up my heart. It costs me a ton of money. So now I can't buy healthier foods. And so me framing this question as an open-ended question where I basically, instead of selling to the patient that smoking is bad for you because it causes cancer, they're reversed. They're telling me that smoking is bad because it causes cancer. And so this starts to develop an internal tension in people, and it makes them think about their behaviors a little bit more. Hey, I'm saying out loud smoking causes cancer, yet I'm still smoking, and this is going to cause some stress inside of me. The next step, the third step out of the four major steps, is rolling with resistance. So as I mentioned earlier, and as any auditor I'm sure can attest to, there's a lot of resistance when it comes to getting this stuff done. Quitting smoking is incredibly difficult. There's a physical addiction to it. There's a social component to it. And so we as navigators, we as physician navigators, we have to be the ones who acknowledge how difficult this is. We say things to our patients like, yes, we know that this is physically addictive. That first week of smoking, that is the hardest time that you may ever face in this whole process. I am here with you for the entire thing. We are working on this together. And so we don't downplay any of the challenges. We even, I guess, I don't know if upplay is the right way to think about it, but we really put them in the spotlight of how difficult these behavioral changes could be. And we use that to our benefit to say, hey, this is not an easy thing to do. And I'm proud of you for starting this process. And then the final step is supporting self-efficacy. People can make small steps. There doesn't need to be all in once. One visit with me is likely not going to make somebody quit smoking, but we can certainly develop good habits. We can reduce the amount of cigarettes that people use. We could develop reasonable habits. One of the biggest things is a quit date. Establishing a quit date is a very important task. And I'll often ask my patients, what's a really bad day in your history? For some people in New York City, it's September 11th. For some people, it's the day a loved one died, a day that they got divorced. And so I say, okay, we're going to make this awful date the best date for you now, because this is going to be your new smoking quit date. And so trying to find ways to partner with the patient and supporting their ability to do things is another phase of this motivational interviewing, and just a general phase of emotional intelligence and being a strong communicator, and something I've definitely improved on throughout my residency. I don't think anybody is excellent at these things going into it, but as you practice more and more and more, you get better.
So I'm not a smoker, but I think that's interesting just in general. So even if this, we haven't even gotten to the audit piece, which I find, most interesting, and I'm already going, this is pretty good. I kind of like it. So I really appreciate that. Hopefully, if anyone is an auditor / smoker as well, they're a little more motivated to quit. The quit date thing and making it from a day that's terrible in your mind for whatever reason, and then putting a positive spin on it by marking that as the quit date is something, I think that's just a fantastic tip for not only, quitting smoking, but if you're going to establish any kind of new habit or stop a bad habit, I think that's a pretty good tip. And so there's definitely a good actionable takeaway for me there.
One of my patients actually taught me that. That was not something that I came up with on my own. One of my patients naturally said to me, hey, I lost my dad on this day 2 years ago. This is the day I'm going to stop smoking. And I told him I'm going to use this for all the rest of my patients. So
that's great.
It was awesome.
Yeah, I love that. All right. Let's talk about then, let's take that 4-step framework and now let's apply it to audit. So Justin, I'll throw it to you. Real world use cases where you've used this, to the extent you can obviously talk about, if it's confidential, obviously, you can't, but to the extent you can, walk us through how you've applied this and what it looks like from our audit perspective.
Sure, absolutely. So, we'll start with step one, expressing empathy here. So, first thing I like to do in all my audits, and I learned this way back when I was first starting out as an intern, is really starting with that kickoff meeting and expressing that human sense to the audit, even before you get into field work and testing. It's really important that when you're setting up these kickoff meetings and you're getting to know the clients, you're expressing empathy towards their schedules and you're being thankful for their time, because you're right, as you alluded to, Jared. These audits can be challenging for clients to fit into their busy schedules, but ultimately it has to get done. At the end of the day, you can't avoid an audit. You can't, you can have a discussion about to say, this is a busy time and, let's work around it, but you can't just say, I don't feel like doing this audit, so, I'm not going to do it. That can't happen. So it's especially important to express, as from my shoes, to say, hey, look, I understand you're very busy, and I'm very thankful for your time today. But here's what we're gonna do, and let's open the door to having these discussions, so I can work best around your schedule, and we can get this done, and be thorough and effective and efficient with this, but not waste anybody's time here. And that's really the main thing with expressing that empathy. And letting them know, look, I understand you're busy and that this might be overwhelming to you, but I'm here for you, and I'm here to make sure that we're here to make sure that you guys are going to help the company as a whole operate most effectively, and we're not here to get you guys in trouble or things like that. So that's what I would say for the first step, expressing empathy.
And I use something similar because I noticed I would go, especially in external audit, I would go to audit someone or their department or whatever. I've never seen a job description for a website, on a website or whatever, that says, hey, you might get audited today. So it's for a lot of folks, it's new to them also, say for like accounting, finance folks that go through SOX and that typical kind of audit. So I'd always tell them something along that line of, I know this isn't your job description. It's not super fun. We try to make it as painless as possible. We do it quick and dirty, and this is how we do it. And then giving insight into, and this might be part of your process as we go through it, but insight into the process itself, so that, we're kind of all in this together. But I like that. I like the way you framed it as well, and adding some of those bullet points to probably how I would do a kickoff now would be really helpful. So, okay. So that's empathy.
A quick, you reminded me of something, a quick little story I wanted to share many years ago, or not many years ago. I've been working for a few years, for almost 4 years. But when I first started out, it was in a kickoff meeting, and and this is a perfect segue into this whole discussion. The client says to me, all right, so how are we going to get this prostate exam over with? So, already he made a joke to this being a kind of a doctor's appointment visit. Nobody wants to get their prostate examined, but it happens. It's part of life. You need to go through these medical appointments, and it's just part of being in financial services and other highly regulated industries. So that's kind of touching on that point there.
Probably the weirdest note I've ever taken on this show: audit equals prostate exam. But that's good. I mean, it's kind of light, it's funny, there's some humor there, so I think that's a really good line. All right, keep going.
All right, so getting into step 2 here, developing discrepancies here. So it's important that when we're getting into these audit plans, that we're evaluating the controls from where the third line perspective. So we're having an independent function here to evaluate the certain risks and controls. So when we're talking through these risks, we have to speak about them in a way where it gets we start with an open. I'll start with an open-ended discussion for them to tell me more about their controls and what their processes are doing. So I don't put words in their mouth, right? So I'll open the door to say, and I will have done my homework. So I'll have done my preparation. I'll have done read the prior planning memo and I'll do as much homework as I can. But I'll ultimately say, hey, let's talk about your business area here. So what, what's really going on here? And they'll tell me about their area. They'll tell me the certain controls that they're doing. They'll tell me who's signing off on who. And then after I'll let them finish speaking. I think a key to developing discrepancy is you have to let the person talk. And the biggest, most successful qualities I see in higher level management is everybody says you have to be a really good listener. And I think, especially in our audit careers, to develop discrepancy, you have to be a really good listener. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, right? So if you're just a good listener, you'll allow the client to talk about their areas, their controls, and then after they're done speaking, that's when you take the knowledge that you prepared and about their area to say, hey, I see that you told me that you do these 2 roles, but in the prior audit, I saw that you only had this responsibility. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? It's important not to put words in anybody's mouth or make accusations, but allow them to they state the facts, then you state what your understanding is, and that's how you develop discrepancies there. And that's what I would say for step 2. And it allows you to really close that gap between what you thought you knew and versus what they had just said to you. So it's really important that to have that open mindset and facilitate that sort of communication.
And Jared, there's no reason I would expect you to know this person, but Norman Marks is probably one of the kind of premier thought leaders in audit risk world. We had him on the show a couple months ago, and I forget the question, something to the effect of like, what traits should we all have, or skills, most important skill for an auditor, something like that. And he said active listening. And then he went in to tell this story about, I don't know, some manager or something that worked for him, interviewed some executive and came back and said, yeah, it was great and wonderful. And the executive talked to Norman. I might be butchering this to some degree, but and the executive said that was the best interaction I've ever had with an internal auditor. So Norman told the manager that, and the manager was like, I literally said, he's like, I asked questions, a few questions, and then just sat there. He's like, I didn't do anything. It didn't feel special, that I was doing something fantastic. He's like that. I just went in there and asked some questions and listened. And he's like, that's all you got to do, man. Like, just ask questions and shut up. And then when they get done, maybe ask another one. And so I think that speaks to the importance of exactly what you're talking about. Like, if Norman's up there going, I've been doing this longer than a lot of people, and he did it at a very high level. And if there's one trait that, he thinks is really important, it's active listening. So, okay. So that's number 2. Let's get into number 3.
Sure. So rolling with resistance. So that gets into some of where when you hear a client respond to the things that they're telling you, or what your response back is, there could be a potential resistance. They might not like the things you're saying, or don't agree with, the things that are going on, or they might say that the changes aren't as relevant or applicable to them as, you'll hear it in a lot of audits, some audit interactions where they might point to different areas and say it's more relevant there than it is here. And you really have to keep that open mindset and be open to rolling with that resistance. You have to keep that idea to say, okay, you're telling me this is, let me take that information back. Let me digest it. Let me ask you some more follow-up questions, or who are the other follow-up contacts that I could talk to maybe guide me in a better direction. But you're really instating that principle that you're trying to find solutions that work for everyone, right? It's not, we're not here to come away with this, with us getting a solution that you guys also can't agree with too. We ultimately want to get on the same page here with this sort of resistance, so that you understand why we're here, and you accept the different findings or the different difficult discussions that we might have about our testing or our findings here. So it's really just getting into this dialogue that we can have these difficult discussions, and that, you know, we're not here to make you look bad, but you know, we're open to exploring different approaches that align with your team's needs and priorities. Sure. So number 4, supporting self-efficacy. So this is a really important one here in audit too, because the end of the audits, we ultimately have our findings, our exceptions. And the reality at the end of the day is we tell them what our findings were and we explain to them why it's important. But after we issue the report, and you know, we check in with them through periods of time to see how the management action plan has been going, it's really on the control owners to implement our findings. So we really support we really support our clients to validate their findings, but that is done, that work to make them feel empowered to update their controls and their findings is done through the communications that we had all throughout the audit. It's done through the good impressions that we left. It's done through the great dialogues and communications that we had, so that after the audit's done and we're not, you know, buzzing them weekly, they say, oh yeah, I remember that when Justin explained to me why this was important, and I remember how grateful and thankful he was for my time. So yeah, I'm going to listen and I'm going to do what he wants me to do. And you know, I believe that this is a great idea because we talk about it. So really supporting that self-efficacy happens throughout your actions as an auditor, throughout the whole audit process, from planning to completion. So it's just really important to know that it is on the client's end to implement your findings, but that needs to be done through work and dialogue that's had in the whole audit process.
All right. So, Jared, unlikely that you know this because this isn't the doctor podcast or the internal audit or internal medicine podcast, but basically the goal of the show is to try to get actionable information for auditors so that we can learn these protocols like you all have described and then go implement them. And so I think there's been a ton of, this is how you can actually do this from your side, as well as on Justin's side, to say this is the audit perspective on that. So with that said, really appreciate you coming on. I know we're going to pick up the conversation at a later date and talk about the spikes methodology, but for now, is there anything that you want to leave the audience with?
Yeah, I'll say, and thanks a ton for having me. It's a lot of fun and lets me learn a little bit more about what my brother does with his day. And maybe next time we could get your brother on too. We could have a 2-on-2 kind of thing. I'd say there are 2 overall goals when it comes to these communication methods. The first goal is to gain trust. Our jobs as professionals, whether they're doctors or auditors, is to, sell to our patients or clients that we're not there to make their life more difficult than it is. So we're there to navigate them through a difficult situation of some kind. So gaining trust. And then 2 is really to be liked. If somebody likes us, they're more likely to believe what we're saying is good and work for that. So if you throw away all the little, nobody needs to remember any acronyms, but if you can find ways to gain trust and be liked, everything else falls into place.
Then I'd like to echo Jared says he's very much thankful for having you, being on this podcast and having us here. And what I'd like to leave the audience with is something I heard from a mentor once said to me, where he said, the best work gets done when you're open to anything but attached to nothing. And I feel like that having that mindset with communication is very important. So if you come into any conversation with this mindset that you're attached to your ideas of, okay, I knew the audit area and I know exactly what's going on here, and no matter what this person says, I know that I'm right about this, you are going to lose whoever you're speaking to, because in reality, life changes and businesses move on, and different things happen in the industry. So you can't be attached to information that you already knew from the past. You have to be open to anything that client can say to you when you're giving them the open floor to speak about their team and their processes and any of the problems that they're dealing with. So you really have to be open to any type of discussion. And a lot of these things, you'll have difficult discussions, and that's why we employ the spikes technique and other different communication skills. But really not having this closed mind, not having a closed mindset in terms of any communication is very important. So that's what I'll leave the audience here with today.
Hey everyone, thank you very much for listening to this episode of the Audit Podcast. Whatever platform you're listening on right now, I'm sure there's a subscribe button somewhere, so please hit the subscribe button there. If you're listening through iTunes or Spotify, feel free to go give us that 5-star rating. It only took me about 16 seconds to give myself a 5-star review, and it really helps to get future guests to come on the show, so we'd really appreciate that. Lastly, be sure to check out the show notes and follow us on all our social media channels on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and on TikTok. Also, if interested, please sign up for our weekly newsletter from the Audit Podcast. Thank you all. Have a great one.